Did you know that the average rate of victimization by homicide, assault, and threat is 6.8%? And did you know that in the Caribbean, this rate is higher than any other region in the world? This statistic was put out recently by the Inter-American Development Bank. Today, we are here to talk about crime and violence prevention in St. Lucia, and we have a very special guest that I will introduce to you when we get back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Thank you for joining me on yet another episode of Uncut, and I'm your host, Lisa Jawa here. Today we have in studio Mr. Ajani Bourne. Ajani, thank you so much for finally joining me. I know this has been a long time coming. Ajani and I spent some time in Guyana early in January as part of a team of community activists and volunteers with the USAID program, CFYR program to be exact, Community Family and Youth Resilience Program, and we attended the Crime and Violence Prevention Summit in Guyana in January. So Ajani, thank you again for joining me finally.
Not a problem. Initially, I think it was a long time coming.
Yes.
In terms of actually having to sit in studio on this program, and I really want to thank you for providing the privilege. Of course, I think generally when we look at youth crime and the reduction of youth crime and violence, we look at how young people could play a part in reducing those and being change makers within their communities. So,
right.
Of course, I'm really, really glad that you've invited me here to share some of those experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us. So Ajani, tell our viewers about how you got involved in the USAID program and more so your involvement in the community.
Yes. So I started with USAID through CFYR in the back end of last year, 2018. When I got a call that I had to come into the office to work on a USAID program, it was the last thing on my mind because at that time I had left my previous job, which was a news editor, and I was basically looking at the next step. And this was basically a point in the right direction. I think the introduction as a life coach for the Basic Life and Employability Skills program has given me a broader perspective as to what are some of the key interventions that are needed for young people within communities. Sometimes we sit at a certain level and we like to prescribe and we like to propose what should be done. But that program gave me a more or less hands-on feel as to what are some of the key issues that you face, understanding the dynamics with the community and the family and how we as young people could step in there to be more of a guide for the youth who are going through some of these trials and tribulations within their own spaces. So it has given me a different perspective, a softer perspective, and it's made me feel a lot more of someone who could be a mentor to some of these youth as well.
Well, Ajani, I'm glad you touched on that because persons tend to wonder, okay, why do we have so much of those problems in St. Lucia? And we think, okay, immediately what we need to do is provide after-school programs, anger management classes, all of which are good, but do we really understand that we need to address the root causes of those issues? And I tend to see, well, I've had several discussions with some young people going around, well, my constituency particularly, Castries Southeast, and you see a lot of those issues stem from the home. You may have had situations where you had a single mother who had to go through any means necessary to be able to provide for her children, whether that means stealing or, other illegal and legal means to be able to provide. So I'm seeing a lot of situations where we have focused on men, on young men, and say, okay, they are the problem, or because they came out of a single parent home that, they did not have a father figure. But we find that a lot of young women are engaged in crime and violence. What has been your interaction or your experience with that? Because the focus continues to be about young men. And I really think that we are not placing as much emphasis on young women who are suffering as well.
Right. I think it is about the what we prioritize or what we see as crime being what we usually focus on as, some of the major crimes that are being perpetrated. So most of the crimes which we find in the airways are violence in terms of gun violence, gang violence. We also see theft, robbery, and some of the mainstream crimes that usually go onto our news stations.
Right.
A lot of the domestic crimes which are being perpetrated are not being placed of greater emphasis, or not greater emphasis are being placed on some of these crimes. And we find that because there has been so much focus on a lot of these, I would deem them as mainstream crimes.
Like the guns and
tend to
stabbing,
glorify
right.
and place a lot onto the news. There has not been a greater effort placed on other crimes and assisting families, assisting young women to deal with some of the crimes that are perpetrated within their household that people are not aware of, like domestic violence, incest, and a lot of these other, crimes which are swept under the rug. So I think it's really about the focus which has been placed on some of those crimes for a long while, and I think it's important for us to be able to look at shifting that perspective to take into perspective the holistic prevention of crime.
Now, the Inter-American Development Bank also released a statistic that 1 in every 3 persons have either lost someone due to some violent act or have witnessed that. Now, even in the home, you may not necessarily have been abused as a child. You may not have experienced incest or rape, but you would see your parents fighting. Psychologically, these things are carried with you as you grow older. And we tend to see a lot of toxic masculinity pervade our society, where, to be seen as a man, you cannot show any sign of weakness or any sign of emotional vulnerability or vulnerability on a whole. You associate this with women, and you believe that you need to be macho, you need to be, a sexual tyrant, so to speak. So you come across as displaying some qualities that one can pick up as you being very prone to being violent. So we see a lot of those things coming from the home. And as a young person, you develop and you engage in those criminal acts, but then, you are maybe arrested for something very violent. And what you see is that those young persons, and I had this conversation with Dr. Stephen King some time ago when he was in studio, you see a lot of young persons, they spend so much time behind bars, and there should be rehabilitation programs for them. I believe that there are some that have been very, very beneficial, but these young men and women have missed out on so many years, in terms of developing some sort of skill or some talent that they have. Through your experience with the BLESS program, Basic Life and Employability Skills program.
So it's sort of a tongue twister.
Yeah, I know. I think I did pretty good. But what are some of the opportunities that are available for those young men and women in terms of rehabilitation?
All right, so what we've seen for the BLESS program is we've gotten the privilege of working with, and I say a privilege because for a young man to speak to a young man who has come through the system and who has been experienced or who has experienced incarceration, it really is a privilege for me to understand how that plays a toll on the confidence of our youth. So through the BLESS program, we've gotten the opportunity to work with these youth through a 5-week training.
Okay. And
that training focuses on mainly life skills and looking at how those life skills could be portrayed or could be used towards developing a youth's resilience within the community environment. So if you understand that within the community there are various elements which do influence the behavior and the character of our young people. If we're able to work with them through a training program to build their communication, to build how effective they're able to deal with sensitive situations, to build their perspective on what is appropriate dress, then they begin to change how they view themselves, and then they begin to be change makers within the communities, because other young men who see them making that change will generally want to come on board with that as well. So we focus on life skills. We also focus on employability skills, because and I will continue to say that there is a serious problem with our education system where we do not place emphasis on the learner who is not academically inclined. So most of these young people who we find, end up, perhaps in the blocks or who are not attached to structured clubs, etc., find themselves committing crimes. They go through the judiciary system and then they're placed back into the community where they do not have the skills necessary to market themselves effectively. Right. The problem is that without them having some of the skills, then they resort to doing the very same things over and over again. So through the BLESS program, we've had the opportunity to work with them so that they build skills on how do you portray yourself, how do you sell yourself in a job interview, building some of the key skills in CV preparation, curriculum vitaes, and that has given me, it's really showed me that some of the basic things that we expect some of our young people to have grasped, they do not understand the importance of some of these documents. They do not even understand how some of those should be formatted, etc. So having sort of that one-on-one
So the program helps with all of that.
It definitely does, and I think the program is a model, but beyond that, I think beyond just that, peer-to-peer mentorship approach, there needs to be considered effort through communities and through various stakeholders to work with families, to work with the young people directly, and furthermore to work with other institutions like the schools, etc., to build a young person.
Right, absolutely, Ajani. I agree with you 100%. In addition to that, we see a lot of emphasis. People are of the impression that, in addition to education and providing educational opportunities, there's sports. But you find a lot of young persons are just not interested in sports. Growing up, I was not interested in playing sports. I mean, I'd play cricket on the road with the guys, but that's as far as it would go, and I was always in my books. But I was able to, attend music classes, play the piano, sing, do karate. So there are a lot of other areas that we can tap into where we can industrialize for our young persons. That you have a skill, you have a talent. And I attended a town hall meeting by Kenson Casimir a couple days ago, and I was blown when he made mention of the fact that we have those skills, we have those opportunities, but it doesn't just end there. It's not about an arts class, come to an arts expose. It's how you can translate your skill and your talent to, providing an income for yourself and for your family. So Ajani, we'll take another break, and we're going to dive into your role as second vice president of NYC. We'll be right back.
Our Studio Fit and Healthy 911, instructor-led classes that suits all your fitness needs. One-on-one personal training to small groups of 7 or larger groups. Soca Fit, boot camp, high-intensity interval training, indoor cycling, kickboxing, yoga, Pilates, and so much more. Studio Fit and Healthy 911, located in the Vet Clinic building, Bourne, Groselay, where we defy limits.
Sarah, it's Friday, but I can still be there. Let's go home. Wait. I'm almost done. Sarah, what are you up to? Sarah, why would you do that?
Did you see what she had on today? Her clothes didn't even fit and she was messy. My girls are going to love this.
Sarah, have you thought about how damaging this could be? Her family, her friends, her mother, Sarah, everyone can see that. Why would you try and hurt someone so innocent?
She didn't, it's not that big of a deal.
No, Sarah, not that of a big deal, Sarah. I'm sorry, but I can't allow you to do that, Sarah. You're hurting someone, Sarah. How would you feel if someone hurt you, Sarah? How would you feel if someone hurt someone? someone you care about, Sarah. Come on.
We are Studio Fit and Healthy 911, located in the Vet Clinic building, Waterwash, Groselay, where we defy limits.
Come on. Sarah,
We must work together to end bullying now. A message from the South Castries Youth and Sports Council in collaboration with the Ministry of Youth Development and Sports and the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College.
If you haven't checked out Ram J's Auto Parts yet, what are you waiting for? We stock a wide assortment of older and newer model popular car and SUV parts. Suzuki, Toyota, Mitsubishi, Honda, Nissan, Mini Cooper, and lots more. That's not all, Ram J's also stocks truck and heavy equipment parts. And if that won't help you, we also do heavy equipment rental to keep your downtime at a minimal. Ram J's Auto Parts is located Masad Industrial Zone, Grocery. Contact us 450-0495 or 716-1400 or email ramj35@hotmail.com.
So, Ajani, before we went on a break, we were talking about your involvement with National Youth Council. Again, congratulations on another term. You are the second vice president of NYC. So tell us what your responsibilities are.
Yes, thank you very much once again. So the second vice president is responsible for spearheading the educational initiatives of the National Youth Council. I'm also working through the Students' Council, the National Students' Council, to focus on developing the student movement, which is present within secondary and tertiary schools, also primary school, which recently started in St. Lucia. So it's more about ensuring.
Oh, so you guys were able to get the primary school councils going?
At present we have 7 students' councils in primary
That's
schools,
good.
and we hope throughout the next 2 years to increase that to a possible 10 to 20.
We're introducing them to good governance at such a tender age. That's impressive. So what are your plans as it relates to, how does your responsibility in NYC marry your responsibility with BLESS and the CFYR program? How can you bring the two together, or what are your plans? What are your intentions?
All right, so youth development, I think, is cross-cutting because either whether you're working with youth to build the employability of them or their ability to market themselves to employers, or whether you're working with youth on the level of social development and youth programming, I think it all goes into one booyah of youth development work. Generally, I think my work with CFR has really given me a different perspective, which I could bring into the National Youth Council, a more underground perspective of working with a young person to be able to understand them, because a lot of the times youth leaders come up through the movement, but then when they get up to the executive level, they lose touch in terms of actually feeling young people and being on the ground to understand some of the issues that they face. So I think that has given me a better idea as to how we could go about approaching young people, and I think generally the work that has to be done and the work that I'm looking to introduce to the National Youth Council will hinge a lot on building the employability of our young people.
That's great. So we're still talking about employability, and what are some of the other programs that the NYC plans to tap into? Because we're focusing on education, but what about skill development? What about the arts, the craft?
Yes.
I have not heard anything from NYC in the past that has been sustainable in terms of that sort of development. And yes, it is true, I believe that NYC has remained very quiet in the past on issues that affect young people. Now, when you call a meeting and you say we want to talk about youth issues, and people are like, oh, it's just not youth issues, they are all different types of issues, we have to understand that youth issues are all issues. Every single thing that we as a population, as citizens of St. Lucia, talk about impact the persons who are coming after us, impact persons like myself. I'm still in the youth bracket, and at some point I will not be, but even as an adult, it will impact my children, it will impact the children of my friends, my family, persons to come. So we have to understand that all of those issues, they impact young people. So what is your plan as a member of NYC, or what is NYC's plan to take a stance on those issues? What are some of the issues that you can be vocal on or cannot be vocal on? Because there are those little subliminal messages that people receive to imply that maybe the NYC is, partisan, or the NYC is in favor of a particular government, hence why they did not, make any comments on any issues that affected young people in the past. So how do you see your executive coming in to change that dynamic?
All right, so the NYC next year will be 35 years old. And over the years, we've seen different approaches to the governance of the organization. The organization evolved from a period with a more socialist approach to things and a more militant approach to then we moved through a diplomatic phase where we used a lot more tactics, softer tactics to be able to change certain things and policies within St. Lucia. Over the last few years, I think we're now transitioning from a phase of relative dormancy to at least getting the youth council to a point where it is appreciated, to a point where it is accepted by young people and where it could relate to young people on the ground. Over the last 2 years, rather, I personally was very disappointed with the manner in which we were able to develop and move forward with our advocacy efforts.
Okay.
This is why I chose to do another 2 years, because I think that in terms of the leadership of the NYC, there should not be a point where we do not speak out, where we are not afraid, or where we are not reluctant to advocate on youth issues.
Right, exactly.
I think generally the NYC should always be an organization which remains neutral and has the young people at heart. So you mentioned in terms of, earlier you mentioned the approach towards building youth talent in arts and culture, etc. The plan that we proposed coming into office for the next 2 years is a cross-cutting one.
Okay.
That plan tackles youth, human and social development. It tackles arts and culture. It tackles the entrepreneurial mindsets, building entrepreneurship with young people, advocacy, and education as well. In terms of the arts and culture, next year, of course, I mentioned that we'll be celebrating our 35th year in existence in April. We will be celebrating NYC 35, and there are a list of initiatives through, within Youth Month, April next year, where we look to engage young people. That would include an inter-district calypso competition that would see young people within various communities have a competition where they're able to use a tradition, which is a calypso tradition, to be able to speak on some of these key youth issues, etc. We also had the Youth Exposure, which was hosted last year, and it was brought back this year as well. We're looking to carry it into next year. The Caribbean Youth Conference, which was held earlier this year as well, we're looking to carry it into next year. And all of these programs include elements of developing the culture of our young people. We're also looking to partner with other organizations so that we could host various workshops for youth in various areas, such as building the entrepreneurial mindset of our young people. Last year we hosted the Youth Entrepreneurship Symposium. This year again we're looking to bring this back. So there are a lot of initiatives which started. It's about ensuring that these programs are sustained and we're able to carry those into another cycle. I cannot speak to the entire action plan because that will take another 45 minutes of the program. But I can tell you for sure that we're looking
maybe sometime you can come back to explain
definitely
the rest.
We're looking at introducing a youth voter education campaign moving into the next general election cycle, where young people will put forward a mandate for the incoming government, wherever that may be, so that we could say exactly what youth would like to see on manifestos of parties, and we're able to basically rock the vote. And we're able to pull young people out from their comfort zones and say that, my vote definitely has an impact on the next few years of any regime. So generally, there are areas that we really want to do better in. We really want to say that we're putting our necks on the chopping block over the next 2 years. We say that we will deliver. If we do not deliver, then we will definitely accept the critic. We will definitely accept what comes with it, but we are ready and willing to take the bull by the horn.
Now, on the topic of crime and violence, which is what we are speaking about, but segueing a bit to find a marriage, we're still talking about employability, skills training, and scholarship programs, of course. As we can see, scholarships are usually offered to the best students on the island, but we don't see a lot more educational opportunities available to those who may not have done the best, but there are other avenues that they can tap into where, maybe they get a scholarship to go to an acting school or something like that. We don't see much of that. But on the issue of crime and violence, some governments have come into power and they have said, or prior to them being in power, they've said, okay, we're going to reduce crime by 10% or 15%. I cannot see an actual number being placed on that, because a lot of those things you cannot just say you will just be able to reduce it. There are a lot of issues that we need to tackle at the root cause. So we're focusing on providing after-school programs, education, opportunities, the Caribbean Youth Conference, the Youth Expose, sensitization on voting, a mandate for youth advocacy for the upcoming general elections, what we like to see. But how do we work with those social issues? What is your plan? What's NYC plan for tackling issues where young men have been through, crime and violence situations and now they are going through the rehabilitation phase? Or how do you intend to work on the ground with those people? Not you in terms of Bless, because I know you're already doing that, but NYC. How will they intend to tackle those issues that young people are facing?
All right, so first of all, I want to say that the approach towards tackling crime has to be one which is cross-cutting, has to be one which is multifaceted in terms of ensuring that all stakeholders are on board. And when I say that, it's because when governments come into power, we say that we want to reduce unemployment, crime by a certain percentage. That is optics, which does put a feather in the hat of whoever is able to accomplish that. However, the problem or the main issue here is how could that be sustained so that we could see a steady decline in criminal activities and employment. I believe that we need to look at this on several fronts. The Youth Council on a yearly basis executes various programs. Some of these programs, yes, we are very strategic and structured in terms of some of those programs. However, I think what we're trying to do a lot more is to cater towards youth who are not within some of our structures like clubs and organizations, which are based in
the unattached youth,
exactly.
Right.
What we're doing now is that we're introducing a new program which is called the Opening Doors of Opportunity program that will engage young males within communities in the field of sports. Not just males, but females through other sports like netball, and we're looking to introduce these programs so that, yes, that will be the main pull factor, because truth and in fact, these are some of the sports that our young males are very interested in, and the women are interested in as well. We're looking to pair these sporting programs with skill building programs, with other skill development programs, and we're looking to do this, make this mandatory for an individual to come through or graduate from that program. So the ODO program will see sport competitions, so we'll have football, netball competitions, and a range of other competitions along that line. Then what we'll be doing is that for youth to move on from that program, they will have to complete a specific amount of hours in any skill building program, which would be life skills development program, CV development, and other skill building initiatives, which will ensure that as they come through that program, that they could be able to be a bit more confident in their ability to sell themselves and be able to support their families, because I think generally when you look at the issue of crime and violence, whilst young people do not have outlets to which they could express themselves effectively, there's also the socio-economic issue of how could they be able to sustain themselves and their families. And I think employment is a big part of it. So if we could get youth to be a bit more confident in seeking employment, then they're better able to support families, given that they could be able to tap into opportunities and feed that back into supporting them.
Well, brilliant, Ajani, and I hope we are going to see a lot more evidence-based programming coming out of the NYC to tackle a lot of our social issues, and particularly as per this this discussion, crime and violence. So I want to thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you are able to come back with maybe another member of your team from NYC to talk more about, what it is that your plans are for the young people of St. Lucia. So thank you, St. Lucia, for joining us on another episode of Uncut, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Bye-bye.